Done.
Yeah, we can all leave.
Have your time back, ladies and gentlemen.
That was
They
pretty
do
good.
free sandwiches on the bottom floor.
Well, I am so excited to have this opportunity to speak with Jay, and we were thrilled that he agreed to bring his expertise and share his story. So we're going to talk about fundraising and partnerships and stewardship and relationships and how that can help your organizations be successful. One of the reasons I was so excited about interviewing Jay or having the opportunity to do that is because I think he has such an interesting and compelling story to tell. I remember, he may not remember this, but I remember the first time that he told me a little bit about his background. We were sitting in the Chick-fil-A on MLK. For those of you that know the owner, operator at Quincy Springs Restaurant, and we had a quick bite, but Jay really told me a lot about how he was drawn to this work and what his experience in life and work was before he joined the Russell Center. So Jay, would you tee us up and tell us a little bit about you and how you got to this place?
Wow. Hey, everybody. And it's good to see a great group. I've always been a horrible student. So Carol may have sent me these questions in my inbox. I didn't read them. So we're going to go all the way live in freestyle today.
So this is going to be good, y'all. It's going to be good.
So censor anything else comes out. I know this is Chick-fil-A, so we'll be careful. But I've always been an entrepreneur, guys. I started my first business at 12. I bought my first house at 19. I made my first million by the time I was 23. No, not quite yet. Because I did not have good money role models, the people that I knew that had money did certain things and lived a certain way. I went from living in a 10,000 square foot home in Country Club of the South here in Atlanta, or I guess it was Alpharetta then, now Johns Creek, to literally being homeless, living in a 9x9 storage unit. But it was there in that storage unit where I really had the great epiphany by the world standards I have been successful. All the cars, all the clothes, all the houses, all the everything, the trappings of wealth, so they say. I was successful, but I had zero significance. I had done nothing to put a dent in this world. And to be able to talk to a room full of smiling faces that are bent, there's another word I'd use, but bent on changing the world, that's encouraging, because I didn't have you guys as role models in the past. I didn't have you as a tribe. But when I start chasing significance from homelessness, you know, within 5-7 years, I was helping to run a $40 million nonprofit organization in 10 countries. I was able to retire at the age of 39 and made my wife a very fervent promise that I would never get another job again because I was committed to actually creating jobs and wealth for not only my family, but the community that I surrounded and I love very much. I had to break that promise because there are very few times in life where you get to be a part of something you know will outlast you. And there are even rarer moments where you get to be a part of something that could potentially change the course of history. And I found myself in a moment to carry forward the legacy of someone who absolutely impacted my life and was one of the greatest entrepreneurs this city ever produced, Herman J. Russell Sr. And how could I give up the opportunity to fundamentally shift the conversation around Black economics, not only in Atlanta, but potentially globally? And so we've been on a journey, and we'll probably get into that in some of the questions that Carol has here. But it's been a life for me has not been a crystal stair. It has not been a straight path to success. I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. And as we talk about fundraising and partnerships, you know, a lot of those bumps, bruises, tackles, and triumphs have gotten us to a point where we're doing really well right now. So I hope to share something of value in this 40 minutes? How much on we got?
About that.
About that 40 minutes I have with you. So, and I hope there's some questions after that if I don't say it while I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So I told you he had a pretty compelling story, right? Through the success and the challenges that you've had, I think when I think about that, it seems that better prepares you to help others, right? And to meet people where they are.
Absolutely.
Meet them at their point of need. Part of the work of the Russell Center, I believe, is to help prepare entrepreneurs, meeting them where they are, getting them where they need to be in order to be successful. Can you tell us specifically what the Russell Center does, how you help Black entrepreneurs, and a little bit about the mission and scope, or a lot about the mission and scope.
Sure. And the first point you mentioned, though, I think it's a real thing. And for those that are running nonprofits, you got to understand it. Run to the storm. I'm a firm believer that most of us take life for granted. Most of us kind of walk straight up and we're always taught to kind of look right in front of us, look ahead. I'm a firm believer that if you've never been on your back, you've never truly seen the sun. Mm-hmm. And if nothing is ever taking the wind out of your sails, taking the wind out of your stomach, and you're in the business of helping people that really need help, you may not have the perspective to really dig deep if you've never been on your behind or on your back. And I think that struggle and that pain gives you an authenticity in the work because you understand it. You can walk with kings nor lose the common touch. And for a guy that was homeless, regardless of how well my wife and I do, there is always a part of me that has a cemented humility because I know what it feels like to have it and not have it. So when I think about the Russell Center, though, we didn't have it. You know, if you came by our building when you did the first time, Carol, we had 2 toilets in a whole building. It was a completely gutted out facility. We started with a 0 budget, roaches and rats kind of crawling around a 70-year-old building. And I know we'll probably get into the history of Mr. Russell a little bit later, but when we start thinking about the Russell Center and why, I think we lose GDP every year because the brilliant ideas that reside on the south side of the tracks of every city that you guys come from, they never reach the marketplaces they don't believe they belong. And I think a lot of organizations talk so much about diversity and inclusion, but not enough talk about belonging. You just can't make a space for me, and then when I get there, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be there. And so for Black entrepreneurs, the data tells us, this is not Jay saying I want to lead some crusade. Black folks get less than 1% of the venture capital. We're 67% more likely to not get our loan approved from a business with the same financials, same tenure, same everything. Institutional bias exists. And for all the sisters in the room of any shade, and white men, for this one, this example may not be for you, but it holds. If you're a woman or you're Black or brown, you've been told your whole life you got to be twice as sharp, twice as smart, 3 times as on point, and 4 times as perfect to survive in a white male's world. And that gets really heavy. And you don't have a lot of places where you can shed that armor, where you can literally be vulnerable enough to learn and vulnerable to make real relationships and vulnerable enough to show up as your whole self. How can we create a space that was a safe space for Black entrepreneurs to fail and fly? Where we could have the conversation, share ideas, where we didn't get that active noise in our ear saying that ain't gonna work, and you went to school while you wanna start your own business, you know it's gonna fail, and that's a stupid idea, but let's create a space where literally dreams can flourish and thrive. That's as nice as anything that they see on the north side of town so we can see value in our own reflection again. And so as we started to build the Russell Center, it wasn't just about curriculum. For all you program folks out there that run nonprofits, far too often, we think we're really smart and have all the answers, so we create programs to teach those poor people what we know. And that goal is only to be informational. If you're going to be running a nonprofit, you have to think about being transformational. And how can you go beyond pedagogy and curriculum? Anybody have a good time in college? Great time? Where'd you go? Who said great time? Clark Atlanta University. Find a way to make one, right? See how you start screaming? Here's what I know. I've never met you before, but if I asked you to talk for 2 minutes about the things you love most about your beloved CAU, or whatever UGA, Duke, wherever you guys went to school, you wouldn't bring up a single class you took. You may bring up a professor, but not the class. Which class? Why? Who taught you that, though? It's Professor East, and I guarantee that it is Professor East that made that curriculum come alive more than just static curriculum. And I will tell you that overall, if you withdraw Professor East from that class and enter someone else that did not see you as a person, did not see you as an equal, didn't accept you for everything that you are, understood why you chose Clark Atlanta University, that class would not have had the same impact on you. And so what I am saying is that let us create a space that starts with culture, community, covenant, before we start talking about curriculum. Wrap it around a world-class faculty for a continuum of engagement for the life cycle of a business. Because what we taught you at 100,000 in revenue, if you make it to $1 million in revenue, it's not relevant anymore. How can we build community before we start talking about classwork? And we found overall, when we paneled 1,500 entrepreneurs around the United States, what was their greatest need? We thought it would be access to capital, and it wasn't. It was community. And so whatever industry or whatever segment or swim lane you're in, if you're not building community, it is hard to change your behaviors or see empowerment in a silo by yourself. If you don't surround those folks, you may, this whole notion, if you know better, you do better. I'm going to tell you one time, and everything you've learned over these past 30 years is going to evaporate because Jay Bailey told you. No. Practice it with a community that supports what we just learned together. And I think that's kind of the thesis of the Russell Center and why we've grown so very quickly, that we've got a 480-person waiting list. We don't even have the capacity at this point to serve all the entrepreneurs that we have. And we have 359 entrepreneurs that we support full-time, and we reach about 10,000 annually. But we're only a 3.5, 4-year-old nonprofit organization. And we'll get into that, but if I leave anything with you guys, lose the notion that information will change a community, and it won't.
Okay, that's huge. That's powerful, right? Folks need more than information.
Absolutely.
Right, need community. So I probably should have done this at the beginning. We have about 38 states represented in participation today. Many of them are online. So they're not from Atlanta. They're not from Georgia. They don't have a connection. So they may not understand why the Russell Center is named the Russell Center, who Herman Russell is, and what his impact has been, not only on this city, but on the U.S. and specifically for Black Americans.
Certainly.
Want to talk about that?
Oh, always. Herman Russell was one of my great heroes. Herman Russell was the guy that spoke with a severe speech impediment, grew up in the Jim Crow South, started his first business at 12, built his first income-producing property at 16. This brother had a pool inside his house at the age of 30, where a young Dr. King used to go and swim and try to figure out how to change the world. You wonder how the civil rights leaders got around on those boats and those planes and those buses and those hotels. It was Black business people that underwrote the civil rights movement, and Herman Russell was one of his chief lieutenants. He integrated this Chamber of Commerce at the city and the state level. So if you're in the state of Georgia and you're a minority company or a minority nonprofit, you got to thank Mr. Russell, because he literally broke that whole barrier open, was the first minority certified company in the state of Georgia, and one of America's first Black millionaires. This is a brother that built half of the Atlanta city skyline, and you said that you went to CAU. I know you went to Spelman. There are probably other AUC folks in the room, but here's what's so special about the place that we're in. Think of a Black man 78 years ago in the Jim Crow segregated racist South, where there were still documented lynchings of Black men in Georgia, and their only crime was thinking too much of themselves. That's it. This brother had the audacity to build a headquarter building that is a full city block wide and 50,000 square feet 78 years ago. Literally, he built that headquarter building on a hill overlooking Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, Morris Brown, Spelman, and ITC. He built it there because back then Black people couldn't go to Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, or Emory. This ain't ancient history. My daddy couldn't go to UGA. I went to UGA, but my dad could not by law. And people kind of think it was 400 years. No, my dad. So he knew as those students would matriculate every day, getting the best education available for Black people at that time, they needed to see the physical manifestation of what was possible for people that looked like them. So he built his headquarter building on a hill overlooking the AUC schools, because he was a graduate of Tuskegee and he understood what that meant for him. And so our building sits on a hill. The trees have grown up a bit since 78 years ago, but literally I look out of my office every day and see the Morehouse, what do they call it, the house. But what's the when they say the house? Anybody from Morehouse in here? It's the house is what they call it. The house, and then the steeple at Spelman out of my own window. And so this is the kind of powerful guy this man was. The Black Enterprise Top 100 is the 100 largest Black businesses in America. From the first list until today, H.J. Russell & Company has never left that list. He went from zero in the Jim Crow South to creating an enterprise that was worth at one point over $700 million. And it continues to be in business today.
So that's a great history lesson. Jay's a walking history lesson in himself, but I felt it important for folks to understand the significance of Mr. Russell. So you've done a lot of work in 4 years. You've built a powerful machine that's helping thousands, but you need money to do that, right?
Always.
You need funds, right?
Sure.
To be able to share the knowledge with people, to be able to have space for those people to build community and come together and connect. Tell us about your approach to fundraising. To the extent you can, tell us a little bit about how much you've raised and how you've approached it. So I want to hear about fundraising, partnerships.
Sure. It's been a dream. We're a bit of a nonprofit unicorn. So in less than the past 3.5 years, we've raised a little over 48 million. And I'm determined by the end of the year that we'll put another 25 million on the board. But it ain't because I just did this out of thin air. I've been doing this for 20 years. So this ain't no overnight success story. This is a grind of learning, because I remember in my earliest days of nonprofit work, I'd have this big old hit list on a whiteboard in my office of all the applications I was going to put in for all of these grants and all of these companies that should give us money, and Coca-Cola give us some money, so I'll just click the link and submit an application. And I got a hard lesson one day because I had applied to Coca-Cola every year for 4 years in a row and always got the thin envelope back saying, "We love your work. We appreciate your commitment to community, but at this time, our..." Got a lot of them letters, right? Until one day I get invited to a dinner and I'm sitting next to the foundation president of Coke. And we are just chopping it up, laughing, keying and the whole nine. Frankie Beverly comes on. I'm charming, so I'm out there dancing with her to Frankie Beverly. And she's like, "Baby, what do you do?" And I tell her my big mission statement, my elevator pitch, 30 seconds. And she's like, "Well, why don't we fund y'all?" "Why don't we fund y'all's work?" I said, "I thought the very same thing." She said, "Send me a paragraph on what y'all doing. We'll fix that." My first six-figure gift came now. I had been doing this for years. And in 6 weeks, I got my first six-figure gift. I say all of that. Some of the best advice I ever got was from a great mentor of mine, Ambassador Andrew Young, right hand to Dr. King in the Civil Rights Movement. He said, "Son, you better make your friends before you need them." And if we want to talk about fundraising, the other word that you have to put up on that screen, it is all relationships. And if you think you have a compelling message in a stack of 10,000 applications with no relationship, like my development folks, I never put in a cold application to a grant anymore ever. Now that is because I'm seasoned and tenured, and Carol and all these folks at Chick-fil-A I've known for years, and we've developed relationships over years, so I don't have to put in like this cold application. I would never do that. But literally the other piece of that, relationships is key, because again, guys, business moves at the speed of relationships. You do business with people. And I think they tell us wrong. Like, I've never seen a building on Peachtree Street uproot, walk across the street, and go close a deal with another building. It's people. And we tend to lose that sometimes because we're so focused on saving the world. And sometimes we get a little jaded by people, because if people were better, we wouldn't have to do this work. It's a true reality for nonprofit leaders, right? So we lose our faith in people sometimes, but we forget that they're necessary to fulfill our mission. And you find some good people along the way. But I think, Carol, the other thing that has helped us along the way is, and this may be bad advice, I am very good at giving bad advice. So this may be bad advice. We were working with Black entrepreneurs before George Floyd. And it wasn't a sexy topic back then, guys. Jay, why do you, here's my feasibility study that I spent a lot of money on to send out to the marketplace about the feasibility of us raising capital to start this dream. The feedback. Jay, just sell the building and give it to other nonprofits doing community work on the West Side. Why do you want to make it so nice? Because if you make it so nice, the people that you're trying to serve won't feel comfortable walking in. Don't work with entrepreneurs. How about you focus on GED training and early workforce development? It won't work. We don't think that there are 100 black entrepreneurs in Atlanta that would even benefit from this vision or mission. Wow. And this is from a formal feasibility study that goes to our corporate, our philanthropic, our established corporate government leaders, et cetera. This is their feedback. I had to ignore all of that. I think in the fundraising space, if you're not ready to get kicked in the chest and understand that nobody cares, like for whatever big problem that you're trying to solve, it exists because not enough people care to see it fixed. And if you don't have the tough enough skin to be able to understand that first, then maybe there may be need for a shift. But then once you understand I'm convicted to this work, that's the second piece, Carol, why we've been successful, is I am fiercely intentional and very courageous about our goal, our mission, and our vision. I'm not going to experience mission creep. This is what we do. And I'm putting this to you because I live by three rules in fundraising. One is nobody cares. Like once I can understand that, I can go into any room, and I had no before I walked in, so I'm not afraid of a no. I eat no's for breakfast. But two, everybody wants to be first or second place. So find one. I don't care what the amount is. McDonald's gave me $50. McDonald's is a sponsor with the work that we have. Nobody, so they always ask you, so who else is investing in you guys? Who else is working with you guys? It happens all the time. Carol, give me $50 real quick. Chick-fil-A is our, and then lastly, nobody gives you money till you prove you don't need it. And so a lot of nonprofit leaders go into this space saying, Carol, Chick-fil-A, if you give me this money, I'll be able to do all of this great work. I ask you to change your perspective. We are already doing this great work. And if you align with it, join us, because if we had more capital and resources, we could do so much more. And here's the data to prove it. Don't just tell me that you're going to do a good thing, but you got to show me the numbers, because you are asking for money from businesses that operate on margins and numbers, and you're coming to them with philosophy, vision, and dreams. You got to shift that. Exponentially, here's the problem that we are solving. We are doing it this level now. We'll continue to do it this level. We're trying to grow and scale. And if we get this right, here's the economic, here's the social, here's the environmental impact that will result in this kind of investment, and be able to talk that language, or yes, you will continue to have the small donations that are literally the kind of paternalistic pat you on the head, aren't you doing a good thing in community? Until you can find their pain points, and why they realize that their business would be worse if they didn't align with you, then yes. And one thing is true, guys, it is hard, if not impossible, to see empowerment through a charity lens. And as long as you're seeing like a charity, you'll get charity. If you're trying to change a big problem, you got to look at it like a corporation, like they try to solve their big problems. I can guarantee, guys, my Chick-fil-A friends, if you had a sandwich or a store or an operator or an offering that was bad for business, it was not making money, it was losing money, and it was a cancer to the system, you'd eradicate it immediately. Same thing. You got to have that kind of relentless pursuit when you start to think about fundraising, that I am absolutely clear, because I could never sell y'all that y'all need to sell catfish sandwiches in one of your stores. Why? Because you cannot. We know what we sell. We know what we do. We work every day to perfect it. And there's nothing that you can tell me about what we need to sell in our stores. And I may think catfish is a good idea, Jay, but we're going to go through our processes before we even acknowledge that we think you have a good idea. It's that fierce intentionality that you each must have about what it is that you do. And if any organization can experience or feel or perceive any mission creep in your mission, then immediately you start to lose ground. That yes, I work with businesses. Our no ambiguity. Well, we'd like to give you $500,000 to help us plant trees on the south side of Africa. No, but it's $500,000. Find someone that plants trees on the south side of Africa and give it to them. But this is what we do. And there have been a lot of times, guys, where we've left money on the table, or we've said, no, thank you. We're not aligned to people that wanted to just pat, people on the south side of town on the head and say, isn't it nice that you're opening these lemonade stands? Then you're not the right fit and you're not a right partner. And we never really take transactional money. Hold your partners accountable. that yes, you can give me a check and we gotta have money, but your company is successful because you do a certain thing. And whatever this thing that you do that's made you successful, I need you to bring a little bit of that magic and your people into this thing, this problem we're trying to solve. Expect and demand more from your partners than just a check. And I think oftentimes we find ourselves as kind of carpetbaggers, just going from person to person, asking for money, and it's a win when somebody cuts us a check. Wrong. Involve them, keep them engaged, allow them to see value in your reflection. And one of my tricks, though, Carol, is if I can ever get you to say "we" while we're talking, I got you. We could actually do, and if we did this, we. This ain't French.
We're a team now.
This ain't French. You see yourself in my vision. Yes. And now I've got a partner. I don't have a donation.
Love it, love it. So a couple of things. Clarity, right, in mission. Often we see folks, and it's clear that they're chasing dollars.
Yes.
And I get it, right? And so the scope creep takes place. Oftentimes, I also think we see folks who are pursuing the wrong partners, right? Tell us how you identify partners.
I do my research. I mean, this is game time, guys. You're not going to see a professional athlete, top-notch professional, anything that doesn't do the work. I mean, there's enough information out there to see who people have given money to in the past. There's enough information out there to see where they're having and experiencing challenges or problems. I can tell when a bank is not doing well by black people in business loans, or they don't have any customers in their portfolio or book of business. And I can approach that CEO and say, okay, your reality is this. Do you want to change it or not? And it's just that simple, because you're going to also have to do the work as well. And I can help if you choose. But I think that's true, Carol, that again, this is back into that notion of fundraising is about just collecting as many funds as you can get. We've got to dismiss that notion, because one, it kind of ruins it for everybody. But also another thing that we do that's not productive is we don't collaborate. You see a funder and there are 5 organizations in the same town that do essentially the same work. And all of them are coming to Chick-fil-A saying we need money. But Chick-fil-A is saying, well, if all of y'all are working on the same thing, are y'all at all working together? And if the answer is no, then obviously y'all aren't that serious about solving the problem. You're just really focused on your individual goal. And that's inauthentic. Collaboration is key. And I think oftentimes as resources become more scarce, as pockets tighten, and as economies change, those organizations that are able to effectively collaborate with other like organizations will win. And I think sometimes we think individual organizations say, I'm the one organization that can solve poverty. Wrong. You're not going to eradicate poverty. I don't care how compelling any of y'all it's a lie. Even in the Russell Center, we have 14 other businesses that have an office inside the Russell Center, and all of them work with black entrepreneurs. So we have effectively created an ecosystem of like-minded organizations where we know that we don't have all the answers, but collectively we have a much better shot at supporting whatever needs whatever individual may have. And we don't try to fake it like we can do everything rather than refer them to somebody who's better capable.
So we probably want to open it up for Q&A.
Oh, okay, we're done.
Wow, we're moving along.
Sorry.
Okay, so Gloria suggested that we open it up for Q&A.
Cool.
Before we do that, is there anything else that you really believe you need to share with this group?
My personal motto is plant seeds that will grow trees whose shade you may never sit under. For the work that you are doing, let it be beyond you, not to glorify you. This is not for a magazine cover or the article or for you to get an award. If you are truly in the space of changing this world, it cannot be because of one generation. Change doesn't happen in one generation. What are you doing now that will impact people that you'll never meet, or that will impact 7 generations yet unborn? The type of thing, my personal motto, as you read in the bio, is build as we climb, and it's not lift as we climb, because I amended that statement. Lift as we climb says that I always got to be present to reach back and pull you over. Well, if I'm thinking generationally, I won't always be there. So how about I build a staircase so anybody that encounters that challenge in perpetuity is able to overcome it because of what we've built together. And so no, I think that's kind of the end of the relationships and partnerships. We talked a little bit about fundraising, but partnerships is the other piece. Find good people that are aligned with your mission. Don't waste your time with the noise that isn't. Be very, very, very selfish with your time, your heart, and your spirit, and align with people that want to go in the same space.
That's awesome, Jay. Now you see why I was so excited to talk to this gentleman. So much to share. So we have a few questions.
And I'm actually going to grab one from online first because I know they had some streaming issues earlier. So I want to make sure that they are fully engaged.
You'll see.
So Crystal Cox, I absolutely agree with the relationship portion. As a nonprofit in a small rural area, how do we create relationships with the big fish outside of our communities who offer grants and funding?
I'm a firm believer in own your block, or own your street, own your block, own your town. I bet that they have not exhausted all the resources that are in that powerful little rural town. I'm a firm believer that if they lock down all the small businesses, all the industry, the power of all the churches and how they're connected, they become really powerful, because at that point, they've got enough girth to say, hey, this entire town is behind the work that we're behind. So those people that are product companies that sell to people in that small town, recognize you're not going to do business in this little small town unless you talk to these folks right here, because they're doing great work. And everybody I talk to says that they're connected with them, from grandma to the big man on campus, whoever's running the biggest company in the county. I think we oftentimes swing for the fences and we don't see the field. And I think we say the easy way to fundraise is list the top 10 biggest companies in Metro Atlanta, and that's who we're going to make our $1 million from. Versus saying it's far more likely for us to look at these 25 companies that all have aligned missions that may be smaller, the donations may be smaller, but their capacity to help us build is greater than any one gift that I could get from one large organization. And as one that's a city boy with country roots, we've invested a lot in small towns. I think small towns are going to reemerge post-COVID. And I think for those nonprofits that serve people in small towns, if anybody's from Atlanta, there was a point in my life where when I was growing up, New York was the coolest. Everybody wanted to be from New York. Until Atlanta, and I give it to Outkast, they really brought Atlanta out of the woodworks, because that's where I left and developed my love for Atlanta. And we developed this kind of swagger that says, we don't need to be like New York, they need to be like us. And I think small towns tend to think that all the money and resources are here, and they forget that there's so much power and magic right in the 3 feet around them. Just remember the 3 feet around them, and that would be my suggestion, because you become a lot more compelling to a large organization if they understand your commitments from all of the smaller organizations in your community.
That's great. One more from online, then we can go to the room. This may be premature. This was early on. But as a white person who would like to be more involved in uplifting women and people of color who are experiencing barriers, what is the best way to accomplish that without coming off as a white person who knows better than they do?
It's tough. Cannot lie. There's a lot of, and I mean that. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of mistrust. And if we ignore that, we are being intellectually disingenuous. So I like being very real and transparent and saying, yes, it is tough, but I think authenticity wins the day. That if you give me a second to warm up and you keep showing up and you're authentic every time I see you, then I start to begin to develop the kind of trust that allows me to hear you. And then after I can hear you for a little while, at some point, maybe I'll see you. But we cannot ignore, especially being in the South, and they ask the question if they're in the South, there is so much to unpack there that we think we can just leapfrog over it. And that's why these partnerships oftentimes fail and people come off as inauthentic. It is a dance that we must do to build trust together and build bridges. And you just cannot rush through it because you feel like you want to do more. You've got to build together.
Thank you. Questions in the room? Yes. Yes.
Hi.
Hey, Lee Hall, Covenant House, Georgia. I know. I can't
my girl.
wait to meet you. My question is, I love your perspective about
collaboration with, your partners in the community, and not necessarily funding partners, but your other nonprofits in the community. But I think it gets to be really frustrating because I think that a lot of the nonprofits have gotten to that mindset where, like, we know we're not competing against each other, that we're working together, but it still feels like sometimes the funding partners still have that competition mindset. And it's like, tell us why you're the best. Tell us why you're the only one in the community. How do we help change that narrative and that perspective when, there already is this power dynamic at play? They have the money. And there's like, and just,
Bad advice alert.
Okay.
To those nonprofits and to those those companies, someone has to have the courage to tell them. Yeah. You may not get the money, but for a culture to shift, they must be faced with reality. Because they have the big bag and they can cut the check, we usually kind of kowtow to the toxic practices where, yes, there's a 74-page application for $25,000 that it literally cost me $35,000 to fill out the application that's going to give me $25,000. And if I'm not able to tell you that it's inauthentic, it doesn't support anybody, that you're doing it for self-grandizing, that you're doing it to make me fall to my knees and beg you for this money, that you're patting me on the head and it's a paternalistic type of practice, it's not going to change. And I think because so many people, back to what I said earlier, we're starving out there. We're dying on the vine off some of the times. It's really tough to raise capital for a nonprofit organization. One of the things that I try to do most is with my corporate partners is to develop the kind of relationship where I can kick them and they know that it's coming from a space of love and trying to move forward together. I'm not picketing their business and saying you're just wrong. It's literally a nuanced approach to building strong enough relationships where they can honor your truth and hear a little bit of their own opportunity. Because if we don't say it, it's going to continue on, because usually philanthropy is the department that doesn't have the greatest amount of power nor a balance sheet kind of voice in a company. And so they get heard last. So they're feeling a little bit of it too. They have voices, and when they run it up the flagpole, it gets sent right back down. And then it comes regurgitated out back to you. It's hard, but we have to hold and be honest. And yes, sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and sometimes you will maybe burn a bridge. But how far are you willing to go with that? Because some things need to shift.
All right, and probably this will be the last question. I saw your
Sorry,
hand.
I'll be here for a little bit, I think.
And then he can hang.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hey, live stream,
Chantel.
y'all messing up for everybody.
I'm Chantel Fisher with the Soul Fisher Ministries in St. Louis, Missouri. And so my question is, I know you kind of touched on this a little bit with the fundraising side, as far as like it not being like transactional. How do you make sure that same mindset doesn't set in with the partnerships? Because I know we partner a lot, but sometimes partnerships begin to feel more transactional.
So do marriages. And so
Was that the last question?
it's the same answer though, right? If your communication isn't there, if you're not showing that you care, if you're not doing things a little differently, if you're not spicing it up every once in a while, if you're not doing some things outside of the normal, like, yes, it could start to get transactional because everybody's busy, everybody's focused, and guess what? If we continue to just do this thing, eventually it becomes habit. And we're just kind of going through the motions. And quite honestly, then if you look at your impact is probably suffering as well. I think the relationships are work, and you got to check in with folks. You cannot take folks for granted and just assume everything is going to work. You can't be my 3-year partner if I only talked to you twice in those 3 years because things are working okay, right? But they could work a whole lot better if I even just sat down and had lunch with you and asked what's really going on. How can we make things better? And I know that happens. I've seen it happen. I've been a participant in it. So this is not me condemning. It is me saying I've been guilty of that as well. And, I took for granted partners that have just always been there. And we never checked in. They're still there, but it's plain. And so we got to punch it a bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the fantastic partnership and marriage advice, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And it sounds
Oprah, you get a car.
That's right. That's right. It sounds like Jay may be around for a little while afterwards, so feel free to.
Sure, and if y'all on
chat.
LinkedIn, it's kind of like my quasi living room, Jay Bailey. I'm really easy to find. Just that name there. It'd be a lot of them, but I try to get most. You send me a note on LinkedIn? 6 years ago when I'm going to tell what I'm saying. 2 years ago, I sent you a message and said, hi, how you doing? Boy, I'm telling you.
And if you follow him, he's got a new partnership at least every other day. You probably know that.
True,
So
true.
there's a
Hey,
lot to
we're working
learn
over here, baby.
in monitoring that.
So, love it. Were there other questions? Sorry, online people, y'all don't get this stuff.
We'll leave. If y'all want to talk to Jay, maybe out in the.
Okay, oh,
is
you're
that
getting,
okay?
that's the old,
we are.
y'all ain't got to leave.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.